Hello, hello. Come on in, guys. As you're popping on, let me know you're here. I'm getting set up, sharing to a couple places, waiting on my dad to pop on so I can get him on here. It'll be just a couple minutes. As you hop on, say hello and let me know you're here. Oh, hello, guys. How y'all doing? It'll be just a second. I'm waiting to see my dad pop on. As soon as he does, we'll be able to get started. I'll bring him on. Let me see if I can do it this way. Nope, I don't see him yet. Is he watching, Mom? Oh, wait a minute. Let me see if I can do it this way. There we go. I think we're getting. It says it's adding him. Give it just a second. And there you are. It added you. Yay.
Hey, turn that down. How's that?
Oh, you sound good.
Good.
I am going to share our video a couple places, and then we can get started and jump right in. Give me just a minute.
Well,
I'm thrilled it worked.
I'm sitting where hopefully we'll have you a chair for your next visit where you can read and pray and study and
All right. Can you move over just a little bit? You're almost a little bit out of camera.
if I do, I lose my background. It goes white.
Well, we would rather see
But
you.
if I get out of the picture,
No.
usually then I get the background. But how's that?
Perfect.
As the sun goes down, probably get better behind me.
Yeah. I'm kind of dealing with some background issues myself because we have noise all over this place. There's a lot of construction going on, and it's fun. It's
I
fun.
thought you meant Ronnie.
No, Ronnie left, and he is down at the pond fishing again.
Is he?
I probably will have a very hard time getting him in our house from now on.
Good for him.
Okay, well, I want to go ahead and introduce you. For those of you that don't know, this is my dad. You guys have heard me talk about him, I'm sure, if you follow me for very long at all. I can't think at the same time. I'm sorry, I'm looking at my screen. So I appreciate you joining me tonight. I'm so excited. I was thinking today, when was the last time that we actually taught together or did anything ministry-wise together? And it's been years. Do you remember
when? Been a long time.
Do you remember when you was teaching Sunday school years and years ago? And I can't even remember exactly what the topic was on, but I would come in and help you, not help you, but talk with you sometimes. I think you had invited me to share. I can't even remember what I was sharing on.
Yeah,
Oh, it may have been like NAMBLA and those types of things.
It
like
was. It was
yeah.
It was on NAMBLA. It was on kind of what was happening at that time with the progressive culture. That was I was teaching on, like government and our Constitution and our founding fathers.
That's what it was. So it was years ago. So this is the first time we've been back together like this in this capacity for years. So I'm really excited. And I say this is one of many. And that's just what I say.
It's interesting. So
I think you're right. I think I'm right too. So tonight we're going to talk about, I'm going to turn Dad loose in just a minute, and we're going to talk about church hurt. And if you've been around church for more than 5 minutes, you've probably experienced some type of church hurt. And sometimes it can go very, very deep. I mean, we've experienced it where it goes deeper than a family hurts you sometimes, because many times your church family is like your family. And we just kind of want to talk about what that looks like, but more importantly, how you can heal from that and how you can move on from that, because you can get stuck in that place. And when I say you, the finger's pointing back at me also, because I was stuck in it for a long time too.
What's
That and
everybody?
a lot of other stuff. Yeah. I mean, it's like it's so easy to get in that place. And so we want to talk about some really practical ways. How do you move past that? Because if you're sitting in a place right now of church hurt, how do you get past that? That's what I want to help you with. We want to help you with. And so that's what I'm going to turn Dad loose on. If you have any questions, I haven't asked him, but I'm sure he's more than willing at the end, save them for the end, and then we will answer anything you have. So hang out with us. We'll hang out with you as long as you have questions. And we're just here to help and pray with each other and support each other, because this is
Amen.
a deep topic. This is a deep topic that in my opinion, that it touches every single Christian. And if it hasn't yet,
It will.
watch out, because it will. Um, so get some tools under your belt to have for when it does happen. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, Dad. So fire off.
I see Brenda Moore's on. Hi, Brenda. It's been a long time, almost as long, or maybe as long as it's been since Nicole and I have taught together. So, very glad you're with us tonight, and everybody else, by the way. So, want to get started on this topic. I want you to think about and go back to the first love in your life, not puppy love, not that, but when it went a little bit deeper, your very first love, the first person you fell in love with. Because when you fall in love for real love for the first time, you're kind of starry-eyed, you're innocent, you're trusting, you're really naive to what goes in a relationship. Patty and I, praise God, have been married almost 33 years now, and you don't really know going into a relationship what all goes into a relationship. And it's certainly a learning curve. There's a learning process. It's step by step. As Mark Coiner was, line upon line, precept on precept, here a little, there a little, you learn and you grow. But I think about our first love. And you think it's going to last forever, right? You're with that first person, you're truly experiencing and feeling emotions you've never felt in your life. Of course, being young, being at that age, everything's just more intense at that age. But you think it's never, ever going to stop. It's going to last forever. And then that day comes when you have the breakup. Uh, and wow, when that day hits, you experience the entire spectrum of emotions, most of them all negative emotions. It's devastating. It really rocks you to the core. I know for myself, when I went through that for the first time, man, I went off the deep end. I threw out everything I knew to be right. Growing up in Centerville, I played basketball, and I didn't party at all. I didn't go to any of the parties. I didn't go to the senior party. I didn't go to everything everybody else was doing. And I wasn't the only one on the team, but very few of us lived according to, what the rules for the team was. And the reason, I didn't do any of that is basically, I remember, and I would tell people, they're always trying to talk me into coming to the parties. And it's like, no, I don't need alcohol to be happy. I grew up at the First Baptist Church there in Centerville. My grandmother would take me there. And enough got put in me that I knew what was right. I knew what was wrong. I lived that up until all the way through high school, amazingly enough. But then broke up, that first love thing hit. And honestly, I started partying and drinking, turned into, and it went a while. I think it probably lasted about 10 years. I turned in an absolute wild man. As a matter of fact, that is what people called me. Patty and I was at the Great Wall of China. I don't know if that's still there. I think, or the Great Wall buffet there in Richmond. I don't know if it's still there or not. We were there one day for lunch, and I passed a guy, and I recognized him. I hadn't seen him in a while because I started going to church instead of bars. And as he walks by me, he goes, "Hey, what's up, wild man?" It's like, wow, I must have been quite the wild guy. But again, I went from naive and innocent and trusting to all of a sudden making decisions that I knew weren't even right, that wasn't really even who I was. And I know you're thinking, what in the world does this have to do with church hurt? But I think there are two sides of the same coin. I think they're the same thing. I think when you get saved as an adult, or you come back to the Lord as an adult, it's completely different as when you're a child. But when you come back to the Lord as an adult, I think you're starry-eyed. I think you're innocent. I think you're trusting. I think you're naive. And I think there's nothing wrong with any of that. Uh, but you're going to experience church hurt. I know, Nicole, you said that in the opening. If you haven't, you probably will, or you're going to. I think it would just honestly be nothing short of a miracle for a person to be a Christian for any length of time and not to get hurt in the church. The odds are it's going to happen to you. I mean, it could be a congregation member, could be a Sunday school teacher, could be staff, could be a pastor, whoever. But church hurt is going to come your way. And what makes church hurt so much worse is that it's the church. And I think people, I know I did, and I still do actually, but I believe church is the one place we should be safe. Yeah. And I don't mean like all the safe spaces we're doing now with all that stuff going on. I mean, it is truly a place for believers to gather, to uplift one another, to pray for one another, to support one another, and to accept one another. I know when the great Martin Luther King Jr. was alive, he said the most segregated time in America was Sunday mornings. And what a horrible testimony to the church if the church is divided up by color, because that is certainly not how God intended it to be. So church is a place we should be accepted regardless of our social status, our economic status, our color, regardless of anything. It is where we should be accepted and we should be safe. It's interesting. We did bus ministry for a number of years. And as you go out and do outreach, it is amazing to find out how many people have a negative connotation of the church. How many people look at the church very negatively because of something that happened to them that was negative. And that's not how it should be. But even though it's how it shouldn't be, it's how it is. Gandhi made some observations. Gandhi read the Bible. He made some observations about our God and our religion. He said, I like your church. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike your Christ. And wow, how powerful. Because we are called to be Christ-like. But yet our churches are filled with imperfect people. It's no different than any other part of your life. I mean, you're going to get hurt by people at work, people at school, people, I don't know, at soccer, the Little League, at the ball diamond. Whatever in your life where you go where there's other people, you're going to get hurt. But I think what makes it worse in the church is hurt should not be in the church. But we know what's going to happen. Gandhi certainly made that observation that church should be different. You can, when he says Christians are so unlike your Christ, if our church has truly reflected Christ, I don't think that hurt would be there. Did Jesus hurt anybody? No, he upset some tables. He probably kind of bruised some people a little bit, but not in a hurtful, personal way. It was to purify and sanctify, what the temple was supposed to be. But it's a nice topic. I can't help but wonder if too many Christians' lives were living it dependent upon grace rather than striving for a life holy and pleasing to God. We're called to live a holy life that draw near to God. If we truly live near to God, drawing closer to God, not dependent upon grace, but truly taking the challenges that's laid out in the Word of God and living those, what would our churches look like? Would they be better? Can we eliminate church hurt? Probably not, but we can sure get a lot closer, I think, what happens today. Right before Passover this year, Pastor Randy Blankenship, who actually just moved to Tennessee, he's back where his family is from, in the area in Tennessee over by Nashville, where they have lived since prior to the Civil War. He posted an excellent video. A friend of his who is a doctor describing the emotional suffering and the pain that Jesus endured in his final days. He just vividly described the horrible physical abuse. With a Roman whip, it had either metal or bone fragments in it. As he received 39 lashes, the Mosaic law, the Old Testament law required 40. They would give 39 in case they miscounted, so they did not exceed that 40. But I mean, with every crack of that whip, it's tearing into his flesh. And not just cutting his flesh, grabbing hold of, and as they pull the whip back, it's pulling pieces of muscle. It's separating muscle from bone and skin. And his back would have just been absolutely raw, completely raw. And as the people cheered it on, and he just physically was destroyed. But as I think about it, as he's being flogged, who had Jesus crucified? And I said, it's not the Romans had Jesus crucified. It was the church that had Jesus crucified. It was the crowd. Who was the crowd? Was the church. The crowd was shouting, "Free Barabbas." I mean, they wanted to let Jesus go. Knew he was innocent. Did not want to shed his blood. But what did the church say? Free Barabbas. Free Barabbas. So Jesus is just sitting there, listening and seeing his church turn on him and accusing him and mocking him and shouting at him. And what were the pastors doing? The high priest at that time. What were they? They were doing the exact same thing. They were egging it on. They were egging on the mob mentality. They were egging on the church, demanding that they let Barabbas go, that Jesus be crucified. Jesus who left perfection. Jesus who left perfection to come to this cesspool that God's creation had created, had deteriorated this whole planet into. We had reduced it to so far from what God had intended his creation to be. But Jesus willingly left that. He left perfection, came to this earth to give his life freely. But yet here's the church turned on him. He didn't have to be here. He did it willingly. He didn't have to go on that cross. He did it willingly. He did it for the very people who were demanding his death. And the betrayal and the hurt that Jesus had is greater than any of us will ever have. It will never compare to what Jesus endured. And you know what? I think of all the pain he had. I almost wonder if the most hurt wasn't from Judas. And let's not forget his part in this. Have you ever suspected somebody doing something wrong? And you kind of think they are, and you suspect they are? And you can be okay with that suspicion. You can kind of manage that suspicion. But when that suspicion comes to light, when truth comes to light, boy, it hits you with a ton. If there's betrayal involved, the truth of that betrayal, once it is truly revealed, is incredibly hurtful. It's incredibly damaging. And I think about Jesus, so Judas, who walked with him, Judas, who was there with the miracles, the feeding of the 5,000 men and all their families, the walking on water, whatever, turning water into wine, his very first miracle at the wedding feast in Cana for his mother. Healing leprosy. I mean, leprosy was a death sentence. There was no cure for leprosy. Jesus lay hands on it and be healed. Sight to the blind. Judas walked and talked and lived and breathed and ate and followed the living God from his beginning of his ministry till the betrayal, and saw every miracle, shared all of that. And when you go through something with people, when you share things with people, you become even closer. That bond is closer. The bond Jesus would have had with all of his disciples would have been so tight, would have been so close, that when Judas betrayed him, Jesus was also flesh. He was fully God and fully man. Well, I know his man side, his flesh side, his human side would have been devastated by that. I mean, he even told you that he knew Judas was. It was revealed to him and he knew, but I don't think that lessened the pain whatsoever. So, betrayed by one of his very own, betrayed by the church, and betrayed by his pastors at a level that we can never even come close to fully comprehending. And what was his response? What was Jesus' response to the crowd and to the church? How did all the hurtful words and the betrayals and the unjust whipping and the crucifixion, all of that, the crown of thorns? Have you ever thought, you ever thought about maybe thorns that long after living in Arizona? I have a completely different view of this. Everything hurts in Arizona. Nothing is pleasant outside in Arizona. When they fashioned a crown of thorns and they jammed that on his head, I am absolutely sure thorns just went right through his skin, right in, pressed up against his very skull. It had to have been excruciating. Even the crown of thorns, the mocking, and yet hanging on that cross, gasping for air, trying to breathe every last breath. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Jesus had compassion and forgiveness for those people, for the church, for those high priests. He wasn't angry. He was praying and interceding for God to forgive them. He wasn't angry because, he knew that there was, either they didn't realize what they were doing. They didn't realize that they were putting the very Messiah they had been watching for and hoping for and waiting for centuries, that they were putting to death, or they didn't know a better way to do something. And I think so much of the time when church, because we are dealing with people and imperfection, so often people don't know a better way to do something. They don't know a better way to do church. They don't know a better way to live a life reflecting Christ, to live a life pleasing to Christ. I think in church, it's real easy to get caught up in church. I think when we get caught up in church, it becomes very social. I think there's a lot of danger in that. There's a lot of danger if church has been reduced to anything less than an encounter with God. If it's anything less than a house of prayer. It reminds me of Gandhi's words, right? Let me go back to that and make sure I get that right. Gandhi said, I like your Christ. I do not like your Christians. Your Christians are so unlike Christ. So Jesus realized that either they didn't know what they were doing, many of them, some of them, or that they didn't realize a better way. And I think that's so ingrained in our churches. I think, again, and I don't want to get too off the subject tonight into that whole grace movement, but I think when we begin to live our life trying to keep it covered in grace rather than living as close to God as we can, it allows these things to come in. But see, Jesus kept the proper perspective on the cross. He absolutely, in spite of the agonizing pain, in spite of the public spectacle, as he was hung on that cross, he absolutely understood in that moment that this whole thing was not about the church. It was about Satan. Church hurt is one of the most potent, powerful weapons that is in Satan's arsenal. I mean, it's huge. And let's go into what happens when we get hurt. What happens? Recognize that this is an attack of the enemy. What if we do not keep the proper perspective like Christ did on the cross? Well, our actions are oftentimes our reactions. We're going to influence others in a negative way, or we're even going to hurt others. You know, um, your flesh, when you get hurt, what do you do when you get hurt, right? You want revenge. You want to lash out. Maybe, you want to, I don't know, you want to gossip. There's so many reactions that happen when people are hurt, and none of them are good because it's your flesh. Your flesh is crying out. Your flesh wants its revenge. Your flesh wants to respond. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on of what our flesh wants to do. Would we let our emotions and our feelings, our flesh, or when I say feelings, the same as flesh, when we let our flesh drive our actions, Satan has won. He has divided the church. I mean, how many of you have you may not have ever been through a church split, but you probably know about a lot of church splits, and that it's heartbreaking when we come to a place where a congregation, people part ways. If you let your emotions and your flesh drive your actions, Satan has absolutely neutralized you. And here's the thing with church hurt. I go back to that whole first love thing, right? When you lose your innocence, when you're no longer naive. For me, it took years to recover from that. I mean, it was probably a journey until I met Patty, and somehow she domesticated me. Praise God. It was a very long journey. Well, I think what happens with church hurt, a lot of people go on a very long journey, and it can be years. I mean, what happens with church hurt? You can become depressed. You can absolutely walk away from God. There's people who have gotten hurt, they walk away from God, and they never return. Where is their eternal salvation? Yeah, it's a great question, because while Satan can't rip you out of God's hands, you can walk away from God. And if we walk away from God, it's when that day comes, when the day we draw our last breath on earth, that assurance, the blessed assurance that you should have and your family should have, it's not going to be there. It's interesting. You see, every month, you're going to see several people that have passed. And I always see, and people, rest in peace. I'll see you on the other side. And all those things we want it to be in the afterlife. Excuse me. But I think, if we let church hurt come in and we let Satan separate us from God, and we walk that road for too long, and we get to the place where we draw our final breath, do we have divine hope? Man, and I don't think so. And I say that out of the utmost sincerity from people I've known and conversations I've had. I mean, that's the goal of church hurt, is to separate you from God. Scripture is clear. Draw close to God, and he will draw close to you. So church hurt is going to come after you, but then it's actually worse than just you. Because with church hurt, you're going to start affecting those around you. Family and friends and co-workers. As you grow lukewarm, if you respond in a way unlike Christ, where you let your flesh do the talking instead of your spirit do the talking, I mean, your loved ones are going to suffer. You're going to affect your loved ones' beliefs. You're going to affect. Everybody has a sphere of influence. Everybody has people that they're close with. that as you go through things, how you handle them, you will help shape them and you will affect them. The tool, church hurt is a tool Satan uses. When you get hurt, it's not just you. He's going after you and your friends and your family. That's how church hurt works. It's kind of tough to say. And it's for us to be cognizant of that. The thing is, your flesh isn't going to see that. When this happens to you for the first time, you don't realize it. And that's part of the danger. With so many things with God, it's as we go through it, we learn. It's as we endure and we work patience and we see God put things together and we begin to get understanding as then verses really start leaping off the page at you. And you begin to understand it and you put it in its proper perspective. That this attack is so potent. I mean, when you first got saved, did you think anything would ever separate you from God? Did you ever think you'd set aside your ministry or your calling? No, not at all. But I did. Although Nicole keeps trying to get me to find a shovel and dig something up. So, but I did. I mean, and it took years. And I think about how I handled my church hurt, and I would say not very well. I mean, I was in a depression for I don't know how long, for some time. And then the depression was followed by absolute lukewarmness, and probably not so much warm and all that. So it was tough. I mean, it wasn't dead inside of me, but it was on life support. Let me put it that way. Church hurt is real. I mean, it can even, and I never did this. I never questioned God in this thing. I mean, I never questioned his existence. I questioned any of those things. I was just fine without. I was fine doing whatever I was doing, which is mostly just working. Worked a lot. And I've always worked a lot, and I just get wrapped up in my work. So the power of it is to neutralize you, separate you, and take as many people with you as Satan can. That's how church hurt works. And we have to recognize it. Now, once you've been through it, it's different. Once you've been through it, I think you begin to maybe watch for sheep or wolves in sheep clothing. Or maybe when someone says a sharp word or misspeaks, it doesn't offend you. You let it go. You understand it. Those are all important things that we have to learn. But I think once you've been through church hurt and you get back to where you need to be with God, you can go forward much easier. You can go forward and walk the walk with greater understanding, with greater patience, and with greater love for people because you realize what's going on. And I know for me, this whole process of recovery from her, it was long. I mean, you're talking 12 years, I think, or almost 12 years it's taken me. And I'm thinking, how did I overcome my church hurt? And I mean, it starts with forgiveness. You have to reach a place where you truly forgive those who hurt you. I know Nicole talks about you have to reach a place of true repentance. And it's the same repentance when it comes to deliverance, forgiveness when it comes to hurt. There's a lot of prayer in that. There's fasting in that. Fasting breaks strongholds. But I think for me, the first sign of hope was when we were still in Tucson. We had very good friends out there, John and Janice Reimer, and they invited us to go up to Mesa for a weekend to a John Kilpatrick revival. And John Kilpatrick, he was pastor down at Brownsville Assembly of God down in Florida, in Pensacola, where the great outpouring happened, where just huge outpouring that lasted years broke out on Father's Day. I'm a big fan of John Kilpatrick. You know, I mean, he's just so stresses and seeks and goes after the presence of God. Well, he brought his team there. Lindell Cooley was there singing, it was leading praise and worship. I don't remember the lady's name that always led their pre-service prayer, intercessory prayer. She was there. Basically kind of had his whole team from the Brownsville revival at this 3-day conference. And we went, you know, and I can't tell you all my motives other than interested in always being in a service that John Kilpatrick is participating in. But I think it was just to get out of Tucson and maybe get a break from work, honestly. But we got there, right? And their first service that evening, the intercessory prayer starts and the music starts. And it's like, wow. You guys like, wow. And then worship started. And pretty soon, I was basically just kind of in my chair soaking in the presence of God. I was just out of it. And that's something interesting. I don't know if Brenda Little's on here, but she's kind of really good at teaching that and going through how to soak in the presence of God. And I believe she taught me that. But I had years ago kind of started, I'd be in service and I'll just be out. You'll probably, if you look at me in a service, I'll be like, and that's all that's going on. And Patty's always like, what are you doing when that goes on? I said, I don't know. I'm just kind of out of it, you know, and usually nothing would happen. Occasionally something would happen, but typically Patty's like, God tell you anything? And I was like, not a peep. I'm just out. And I never understood what was happening. I knew I was in the presence of God. I knew I followed the verses, you know, just like John the Revelator was out in the Spirit. Just like when the priests in the Old Testament could not stand for the service. So I knew what it was. It was my spirit responding to God in his presence and the weightiness and the heaviness. And I'm just out of it. And it's incredible. It's an incredible feeling. I had no idea what it was about. And I wouldn't know until the day we prayed for Nicole for deliverance. But that's another story. That's for another video. But anyway, so I'm at this conference in Mesa, Arizona. And I'm just out of it. And it was all 3 services. And whenever they take the offering up, it's like they nudge me. And I kind of go, huh? And they have me take the offering up, I think just to laugh at me trying to walk, because it was pretty wobbly. I mean, God was so pouring it out. But for me, I think the key, the first part of true recovery, the first part of true restoration for me was found in his presence. When I got in his presence, man, it all changed. It all changed. It took me back to everything that's pure about the church. It took me back to everything that's right. My burden has always been to pray for people. My burden has always been to lay on hands, anoint, and pray for people. And being in his presence again, I think broke all of that. I think it broke all of those chains. I think it brought restoration to my spirit. It brought hope to my spirit. And it was different at that point. Suddenly, after being in his presence, I started hungering for God again. I started listening to worship music again. That's when things changed for me. It was at that 3-day conference. And not the conference, being in his presence at the conference was absolutely the beginning of God drawing me back. The beginning of kind of the restoring of my relationship with God. And I think my ministry, whatever that looks like. I still don't know what it looks like, by the way, but I think Nicole's going to make sure I find it out. And so
that's for another live too.
That's another live too. So maybe we do have several coming up. I don't know. And I think the other thing And here's where God settled it for me. Because honestly, when we were in Arizona, we struggled to find a church where we really felt at home at. And that's tough. You need to find a church. You have to have a church. But that's not, you would think that's an easy thing. Especially, here in Eastern Tennessee, which we love, by the way. This is my first live in Tennessee. There is a church. You can't go a mile without passing 5 churches, it seems like. But to find one where you're at home with and where you fit, that's tough. That's a tall order. But I think for me, and I won't go much into this, Nicole, but it was that Sunday, Mom and I drove down from Maricopa. You're in Green Valley.
Oh, you can go as deep as you want into that. It's fine.
I don't want to go a lot into it other than to say, Nicole had really started hearing from God. Nicole had, and who was the tapes? Well, thank you. My other spirit that leads me just spoke. Robert Henderson.
We did a lot of reading with a lot of different people.
Yeah. But you did a lot of prep time, and you called Mom and I, and you wanted us to come down and pray for you. And it was on a Sunday. And we did. And honestly, I listened to, I think I got one of the 6 videos listened to, because I was working 14 to 16 hours a day with Honeywell at the time. So I only got through the first video. Patty, didn't we listen to him on the drive down? We had like a 2-hour drive. So we tried to listen to a couple of them on the way down. But then we got to your house, right? And then we start praying. And then, again, it's this whole out in the spirit thing. I'm out in the spirit, except I'm cognizant. I'm aware of what's happening, even though my eyes are closed. And it was a spiritual battle. I mean, we battled the very demonic.
Yeah.
But it took me back because I'd done that before. I remember in a revival, a lady came in the middle of the afternoon. Well, church we were there. It wasn't open kind of thing, but it was church, we were there. And she started talking about the 7 babies that Christ killed in her belly? I mean, it was the demonic, and I had to get her out of there. I prayed against the demonic in the altars. I cast things out in the altars. I've seen miracles in the altars. But that 4.5 hours of praying for you, that 4.5 hours of me ministering for the first time in 12 years, truly ministering, truly picking up the mantle that I think God has for me. It was through action. It was through ministering to others, in this case, you, when we prayed you through deliverance, is really what broke the rest of it. Being in his presence started it for me, but it was when I activated that. And I think you activate your faith when you step out and you minister in whatever it is that's a burden to you. There's a lot of ways to minister to people. There's a lot of hurting people. There's a lot of hungry people. There's a lot of needs out there. There's so many different ways to minister to people, whether it's through prayer, whether it's through helping, whether it's through just listening, whether it's being, so many ways to minister. But I think for me, what was the key for me to get out of this hurt? Well, let me rephrase that. The hurt stopped. The hurt lasted for a while. I don't know how long. But what came after the hurt was nothing. Numbness.
Well, there was a little bit of something there because there was some rebellion there. Do you want to talk about that? But really, let's kind of describe it, because I know that there's probably people who are in the same situation. Like, you went through phases. It didn't stay in a place of hurt.
Well,
Had it just stayed in
better at identifying and describing the stages.
Well, had it stayed at a place of hurt, I think that would have been easier to come back from. But it's like the hurt went in, like, first it was shock, like you went through stages of grief, I think. Like I seen stages of grief,
I agree
shock,
with that.
denial, depression, all of those things. Then it moved out of that more into the numbness, probably.
Mhm.
And then from that, it was kind of like an obstinate rebellion, like I want nothing to do with church, period. God would have to
Yeah.
come in and break down this cement wall around me to get me to even look at church. And it kind of stayed in that place for a while. And that's the wall I think he broke down, because I think it progressed, because it's almost like the longer you stay in that place of church hurt, the further you get and the harder it is to come back from, and the further away you get, and it becomes something. I mean, it's like it takes a life on of its own,
I
and
agree.
it's no longer just hurt. Like we can label it church hurt at the beginning, but then you can label it a whole lot of things if you don't get it taken care of, because by the time that you broke out of it, I would have said apathy, lukewarm at best, like you said, rebellious, just like I want nothing to do with it. I would rather work 500 hours a week in my job than to work 1 second in ministry.
That's fair.
That's, yeah. So that I just wanted to go there because because we call it church hurt, but it can evolve into a whole lot of
Well,
feelings.
that's true, but that's why it's such an effective tool of the enemy.
It is. Yeah.
That is, he uses it to drive a wedge between believers, drive a wedge in church, drive a wedge between friends, drive a wedge in families. It is one of his most effective tools. And you're right, though. I think, the things I went through, and again, I don't know how long I went through those, because I mean, I did other things immediately. I was still kind of teaching, still doing some Wigglesworth things, still involved, but, slowly that stopped.
Mm-hmm.
I went back to get my MBA. So that was study time. All I did was work and study, work and go to school. That's what started where I truly, once I started studying for my master's, is when I completely disengaged from a local church. And that would have been when I started working at TS Tech. That would have been 2010, June of 2010. Uh, and then we moved to Arizona in July of 2012. But from, say June of 2010 is when I became completely disconnected from the local body, and there's a reason the Bible says, don't forsake assembling yourselves one with another. And it is uplift one another. It's your tether, right? And I cut loose that tether. But Nicole, I think you're absolutely right, because you're much better describing the stages than I am. Although I'm not sure about that rebellious thing. Uh,
Yeah.
so, but I can see the walls were thick, because you just give me a hard time in Arizona, and rightly so. And it was usually in fun. It was kind of a fun thing, but it was right on point, because I wanted nothing to do with ministry at all.
Oh, was that the end of the sentence?
That was it.
Yeah. Um,
Do you have more to add?
to that part, no, no. When you do get done, though, I do want to go back and ask you a few questions, but I want to see if you hit them first.
Oh, please. Yeah, and I figure as I go through this, I'm actually almost done. I didn't
Okay.
really prepare a lot, just made some bullet points and some thoughts, is that it would really lend for questions, as I kind of shared what worked for me and the process I went through. Um, and I think about ministering to you is finally what broke it. I am open to whatever God has for me. I mean, I haven't said that in a long time. We have found a local church here we're excited about, and we'll see what happens there. Uh, that's all absolutely in God's hands. So quit smiling. Let's keep going. Let's see. And I think about Paul. Boy, wasn't Paul persecuted? Absolutely, relentlessly persecuted. I think about his words in Philippians 3:13 and 14. He says, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before, I press towards the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Christ Jesus. I mean, that's huge. Forgetting that which is behind. Forgetting church hurt. When you get hurt, understanding it's an attack of the enemy. Understand what the enemy's trying to do with it. Understand people are flesh. People are imperfect. Put that behind. And Paul says, reaching forth to the things that are still before him in God, before him in his ministry, and press towards the prize for the high calling of God, which is again why we can't err on the side of grace. Grace isn't pushing towards the mark for the prize of the high calling of God. It's a process. It's a dedication. It's a decision to draw close to God. But after you've experienced church hurt for the first time, these verses to me really begin to jump out. They really come alive because these aren't easy things that Paul says. Putting that behind isn't easy. It shouldn't have taken me 12 years. It shouldn't have taken me 12 days. It might have taken me 12 hours, right? That's my flesh. But it's to see it and to understand people. It's to understand flesh, to understand the spiritual realm, to understand there is an enemy. I tell you, he does. He goes about seeking whom he can devour. And what better tool to use against a believer than a believer? Not a better tool. Not more hurt can happen. You know what? If somebody at work comes against you, well, who cares? I don't care. Not friends with them. Don't do anything with them. Only see them at work. It's not really a big deal. But let it be a church person, and it completely changes it. So when church hurt comes your way, and I've learned this, obviously, is if we respond like Christ, we take away Satan's best weapon. We neutralize his ability to distract us from God, to distract us from our calling, to distract us from a closer walk. We neutralize his ability to diminish our relationship with God. Gandhi said this. He said, live like Jesus did, and the world will listen. And I thought, how profound. For a person who isn't even a Christian, he understood that if Christians lived like our Savior, the world would stand up and take notice. The world would listen. And that's all I've got.
Well, that was very good.
Well, thank you.
I will open it up for everybody else's questions in just a second. But
Let me know if you guys see a bear walking by. I keep waiting for one.
I seen something walk by. It wasn't a bear, but there was something in your back window. It didn't look like your name.
Somewhere around here, we see a bear.
It was like at the bottom. I don't know what it was, but it's walked by twice. And so I keep trying to look to see what it was because it keeps getting my attention. I want to ask you this. What do you think about this? Okay. You're in a church.
I'm in a church.
And you get really hurt by leadership. And you feel like what they are doing is just not correct. What do you do with that? It's cars going by. I just saw it. Okay. I'm like, what is that?
Not nearly as exciting as a bear going by.
Because I ask this because I've had people say that, well, the leadership just they seem off. Well, and they hurt me all the time, over and over and over. I know what I would advise. What do you advise?
Well, here's what I advise. If you have a relationship to where you can have an open discussion about that, you should. We are called to sharpen one another. We all, I can't even talk. We are called to hold one another accountable, right? And I'm certainly one. I believe we're all priests. We're all called into the royal priesthood, and I think we do hold one another accountable. Just like you could see the stages of what I was going through much better than I could see it. And I think it's important that we have that transparency with one another. If you have a relationship where you can discuss those things, you absolutely, I think, are almost mandated to biblically. Now,
To
if you
try.
don't have that, I know for me that I will just not cause a ruckus. I won't cause a disruption, but I am going to go on down the street. I'm not going to sit at a, in a place. And what was the phrase you used?
If something is just like if
If
leadership,
something's
anybody in
off,
leadership is
sure.
off, or if they're very hurtful, if they're hurting
Yep.
other people, if you're going and every time you go there you walk away hurt, or you walk away, I don't even want to say offended, but like just deeply hurt,
Yep.
it's not because like you're getting convicted, it's because everything they're saying is hurting you.
Yeah. Well, I've never believed that the church would be abusive and hurtful. So
Hmm.
that for me, that one's easy. If we're talking about abuse, then go.
Yeah.
You need to dust yourself off and go find, I would say, a loving pastor or staff.
Yeah, like
Um,
immediately lock in somewhere else.
if they're off, and trust me, I kind of, when I'm trying to find a church, which, we moved quite a bit when we were in Arizona. As strange as I moved more in Arizona than I have my entire life. So hopefully we're done though. I want to just stay here, settle into a fallen, be happy, just eat a bunch of food, cook a bunch of food. But we'll see what God's plans for that is. But I just lost my train of thought.
I think you were saying the same thing. If the teaching is off or they're
Oh,
hurtful,
yeah,
it's
if
good to
something's
find
off,
someplace new.
yeah, it's like, no, I'm going to go find a place that is on, and on in the sense where the church has the same values that I believe the Bible's calling out. It's not to make me, it's not my agenda, it's not my values, it's what I
Right.
believe the Bible says. And that's why I'm so excited about the church we've been attending, is because it just fully believes in and embraces uh, the gifts and the move and the manifestations of the Holy Spirit while preaching God's word. So for me, I haven't seen or heard anything I consider abusive, and there's been nothing that to me I would call like a red flag that something's off. But it's important, right? Because it's an investment. You want to, you want to be in a church where you can pour yourself in
Yep.
and invest in the kingdom. And that's tough to do. That's
Yeah.
tough to find, let me put it that way. But when you find it, you found something special.
My other question is, what do you think kept you away so long? And what do you think there's anything you could have done? Like, what do you think you could have done differently to come back sooner?
Oh, wow. That's a good question, because there is all the stages you go through. And you did a very good job. I can tell you have your master's in social work. You did a pretty good job laying all that out, all them stages that you go through. And I certainly went through every one of them, several of them twice. Um, you have to get through that. And honestly, what I should have done, well, that was the part when we got to Tucson that made it so more of a challenge. Didn't know anybody, didn't really know any churches, didn't really. Was all brand new. And I will say, our experience church wise in Arizona is different from Indiana.
Yeah.
A lot different from Indiana, I felt. I mean, again, I mentioned this earlier. I want to be in the midst of an outpouring. I want to be in the midst of his presence. I want to be laying hands on people. I want to be praying for people. I want to see signs and wonders and miracles that follow the preaching of the word. I want to be I'll say the full Pentecostal experience. Didn't see a lot of full Pentecostal experiences happening out in Arizona. Some
Yeah.
great teaching, however, some fabulous teaching, but not that embracing and the going after and the seeking of an outpouring.
What about personally though? Like not even connected to a church. like in
personally.
yourself, because you were going to church some, but your heart hadn't changed.
Yeah.
Be, that didn't really seem. I'll back up. What do you think you could have done personally if someone's watching right now and they're like, okay, I'm in a place of church hurt right now. Maybe they're going to church somewhere else. Maybe they're not going to church at all. What is something from your life that you could say, hey, you know, if I had have done this, I think it would have broke a lot sooner. What do you think that thing would have been?
Well, I think, and you can jump in on this, and Mom can too. She's downstairs, but she can hear it. And she probably
Jump
has
in,
some.
Mom.
She probably has some thoughts. And honey, if you have thoughts, just type them in the box. Uh, Although that's usually what throws me off. I read the things popping up, and then I lose my train of thought. But I almost did it right there. I think the answer for me is what I just said. It was in His presence.
Mhm.
What I should have done, and now rather than abandoning His presence, I need to run to His presence,
Wow, that's
even
powerful.
if I don't feel like it.
Yep.
Even if the last thing I want to do is go pray. And there were days I didn't want to go pray. There were days I didn't pray. Probably weeks and months, be honest.
Yeah.
There was days that, I mean, honestly, it wasn't that I didn't want anything to do with God. I didn't want anything to do with people.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, if you're going to do something for God, you have to do stuff with people. They're kind of one and the same, right? You can't really get out of one without the other. I think it's to do the two things I said that broke it. It's to be in His presence, but it has to be, and it can't be an optional thing. You know, we go back to, we're called to be in church. We're called, you know, when the church doors are open, we're supposed to be there. It's for a reason, and it is our tether. I cut that tether loose, and it's whether I want to go or not. I need to go. I need to go. And actually, what I will have to do the next time this happens, if it would ever happen to that degree of severity, I got to get in that altar. I got to fast
Yeah.
and I got to pray, whether I feel like it or not. And I got to get in His presence. I got to put the music on, and I got to go after this to be broke, because it's spiritual. I think it's true spiritual in the demonic sense. I think what you have, you are at that point battling the demonic. You know, this is nothing
Absolutely.
about people. This is
Yep.
not about who hurt you. This isn't about who said what or who did what. That's in the back. That's going. This is about Satan trying to destroy your soul. This is about Satan taking something somebody may or may not have done intentionally. It could be quite by accident. You took it wrong, or you maybe completely misunderstood or misinterpreted what they said. Totally unintentional, but all this hurt is with you. That is when the demonic, the spiritual attack is going to begin. That is going to try and devour your soul. And regardless of how I feel, the next time I'm going to do two things: is stay in His presence and continue to minister. I will not withdraw from the gifts that God gave me.
So, I- if I could put one word to it, it sounds like you're saying submission.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Wasn't I fully submitted the whole time?
Your big toe wasn't even submitted, but that's
What?
neither here nor there.
Okay,
But
I may have some
that
issues.
sounds like what you're saying to me. Like if you get in a place of hurt, the key thing to do, one, is run to God, not from God,
Exactly.
because God isn't the one that hurt you. It's
Exactly.
the enemy. Yes, a person said it, but there's an enemy behind it poking you and trying to make it worse to get you in bondage. And then being in submission. You don't feel like reading the word, do it anyway. You don't feel like praying, do it anyway. Because we're not going by our feeling, we're doing what we know to keep us in God's presence.
Absolutely. And it's not just for us, right? It's for our family, it's for our friends, it's for those around us, right? Because again, we influence people, whether we know it
Yep.
or not, whether we want to or not. You know, that's
Somebody's
one thing that
watching.
I've always gotten aggravated at athletes. They're like, well, I never signed up to be a role model. Well, guess what? You don't get a sign up.
Yep.
You are a role model because you're a professional athlete. So people are watching you. Kids all over the country are watching you. And I'll use the word idolizing in that sense of being a little kid and athlete. It just comes with the territory. So regardless of who you are, people are watching you. And if you're a Christian, a lot of people are watching you. You know what? And there's people that are watching you who were hurt years ago. And guess what? If you handle it as poorly as I handled it, you're not doing a thing to get them back in church.
And you give them an excuse.
You do.
You give them,
However, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, you give them the excuse. And not only that, if you have children and you have grandchildren and you have a wife, a husband, whatever, they're watching.
Absolutely.
They're all watching.
They all are. And you're influencing them. And your ability to handle it with the correct perspective and understand this is an attack of Satan versus personally, it's an attack against me. It's like night and day. Mm-hmm. It makes all the difference, because to handle it poorly, you're putting all of those people you have influence over, or with, not over, but with, you put them at risk. You put them at risk, and all of a sudden, guess what they're going to do? They're going to cut the tether. They're going to cut connections with the church. They're going to stop praying. They're going to stop going after his presence. They're going to start doing all the things that we have to do that draw near to God, right? Because guess what? You know, as you described, what you described, them giant walls I put up or whatever. Well, guess what? I was completely insulating my flesh. Nothing was going to get to me.
Yeah.
Nothing.
And the thing is,
and that's a dangerous place.
And we may get back, but the people watching us may not. So we may rebound ourselves. Mm-hmm. And I'm not heaping on condemnation or guilt. That's not what I'm saying at all. But just to bring it into perspective, it's like, okay, we may rebound and get ourselves back where we need to be. But what about the people who are watching us fall? Mm-hmm. You know,
absolutely.
And that's pretty heavy. I mean, that's heavy to think about. That's heavy.
Well, it is. It absolutely is. When I think about all the people, I'm sorry, I'm talking over you.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
When I think of all the people who have a very negative opinion of the church, and you just said all we do is really just kind of give them permission to continue doing that. Yeah. We've not, all it does is add fuel to their fire. All it does is justify their bad decision, because we lose perspective. Uh-oh, Patty said something.
Well, let me read a question first. You have a question from Judy. Let's go back up to her, because I don't want it to get buried. Okay. She said, but when you are blindsided by a person in a godly position, how can you rebound from that?
Well, I know what worked for me, and it's to understand that they're just flesh, and people are going to mess up, and people are going to make mistakes. But it goes back to, we have to probably double our efforts to draw near to God, honestly. And we're not going to feel like it. When you're hurt, if your trust has been violated, the last thing you want to do is to go pray, to try and draw closer to God. That's exactly, Satan wants you to run. He doesn't want you to run to, he wants you to run from. And you think you have to run to God. I think that's so important to understand that, because you know what? What is God? God is faithful. God is always faithful. The word says he will supply our needs. Every day he's going to supply our need for that day. He knows the pain. He knows the hurt. He knows what we need. Unless we run to him, we're not going to get that. We're going to end up sitting there just wrestling and fighting with the enemy, instead of running to the cover and the protection and the restoration of our God. And I think for me, it's like, if I would ever again find myself in that sort of hurt and that sort of place, I know exactly, what I would do, Judy? I would get a bunch of tongue-talking, Bible-believing people that and just get together, put on worship music, bring out the oil, man, and just pray. Just pray. We have, and this is what I learned. This was incredible. The lessons that I learned praying for Nicole that day were just unbelievable, because it's like suddenly the word came alive.
Yeah.
The word and its promises came alive in full power and in full glory. for 4.5 hours, we battled the demonic with what? With the faith and belief that we could do what the Bible says we could do. And so, absolutely, like in Jamaica. So, if we end up going and we get with true believers, when we get with people who pray with power, if we get with people who understand spiritual warfare, that's the key. That, to me, that's the whole key. That's what my takeaway when you asked me to do this, Nicole, as I really thought about it, that it's the two things. It's his presence and it's being in ministry. We have to do those things, whether we want to or not.
Because that's the things the enemy targets.
Absolutely.
The enemy doesn't target us necessarily going to church, I don't think. Does he love it? No. But he operates in the church himself. He's there in the church. He operates every Sunday, every Wednesday, he's operating in the church. He targets our relationship with God. It's our personal relationship. And if he can use hurt to get in between there, he'll do it every single time. So I think that that is the huge thing. Like if I was in a place still of church hurt, I would be praying against offense. I would be praying against those principalities that come in and try to cause all those things, because there is a breaking off, and there is a spiritual. And like you said, and you didn't really go into a ton of detail, but more things broke off of you that day spiritually, in the spiritual realm. It wasn't just a mental, oh wow, I have this clarity now. There was physical breaking off in the spiritual from your life.
Absolutely.
That was like the rest of the stuff going.
Yeah, and it was amazing as you were being delivered from one demon after another. I was too.
Yeah.
And mine was breaking off those things. I guess I don't know, maybe the phrases had me bound or had me tied down. Because as I begin to operate in the power and the anointing of the Holy Spirit, it was just boom, 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 boom. You know, and I know when we were done that day, you were a completely different person. Your countenance was completely different. The other night, and when you were doing your live with that group, which was, you did so well, by the way, and you just talked about how Mom noticed you could walk. You could actually stand. You could take steps for the first time in years. You talked about your eyes were open because you were down to really squinting. It was amazing the physical transformation that happened in those 4.5 hours. And for me, it was the incredible part. It's like I had never lost a day with God. I had lost 12 years with God from my own choosing. I had lost 12 years because I failed to understand this was an attack of the enemy. I failed to understand and realize what Satan was doing. It wasn't people, it wasn't the church, it wasn't anybody. It was our enemy. Yes. It was the accuser of the brethren. It was purely from the pits of hell. It was a spiritual demonic attack intended to destroy me and neutralize me. And boy, it almost succeeded. It came very close to, succeeding. But as I operate, in that day, as I was in the spirit, warring over you, warring for you, taking the word of God and speaking it in faith and battling the things that we battled, it was gone. It broke every bit of that for me. It broke it all.
And you took back your mantle.
Absolutely.
You took back your anointing. Yeah. You had laid it down and you took it back.
All right, I'll confess.
But I mean, I think that is how serious church hurt can be.
No, absolutely.
You literally laid down your mantle. You laid down your anointing and you walked away from it. And you said, I'm done with it.
I did.
And it took you 12 years to pick it back up again. That's why this subject, we kind of joke a little bit and laugh and things, but it's so serious because the enemy tried to steal what God ordained you for. And it doesn't matter the years because God can redeem all of that. But I'm just
Absolutely.
saying the seriousness of that. If you are in a place of church hurt, it's not just because, oh, somebody hurt your feelings. It's because you have an enemy that is trying to kill, steal, and destroy you. We find that in the Word of God. Oh, Nicole, you go to the enemy all the time. I do. I do. I talk about the enemy all the time because we don't talk about it enough. We don't talk about enough how that he is literally trying to steal, kill, and destroy us. It's not just, oh, well, I feel this or I feel that. We literally have an enemy trying to kill us. I
Mhm.
lived it. I seen it. I see it all over on other people. And if we don't become aware of it and we don't start fighting in the spiritual and we don't put on or pick up our spiritual weapons, we stay in a place of defeat. That's a huge reason why you stayed defeated for 12 years. We didn't know how to battle this situation. We was looking in the natural. All we could see was um, maybe there had been some wrongs. Maybe there had been some, I mean, maybe we were justified in the way we felt. Maybe we weren't. It doesn't even matter.
Doesn't
It doesn't
matter.
even matter.
It's
It
irrelevant.
has, because we were looking in the natural. But the moment, think about this, Dad, the moment we got our eyes off the natural and we started looking in the spiritual, your complete and total deliverance came.
It all broke.
Yeah, that's when the complete, for both of us, it came because we got our eyes off the natural. And I think for me, Judy, like with your question, well, how can you get past that? Take your eyes off the natural. And I know it's hard. I'm not saying it isn't. I come from a background of abuse and I had to do the exact same thing. I could no longer look at that abuse in the natural. I had to get my eyes off the natural and get my eyes into the spiritual and say, okay, what is really going on here? What strategy is this? What is after me? What is this causing? And once you get your eyes off of the natural and you get it into the spiritual, everything changes. Everything changes. It switches everything. It's like the verse that my mom put. For we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against the rulers of the darkness of this world, against spiritual wickedness in high places. And I mean, that's it, really. That really is
Amen.
it. We
Good word,
have
Boo.
to get our eyes into the spiritual. Now, does that mean I'm going to go to and we kind of already talked about this. Am I going to expose myself to a ministry that's off biblically? No. Am I going to expose myself to a ministry that continues to hurt me over and over and over? No. In the natural, I'm going to remove myself, but I'm going to stay in the spiritual so that I don't pick up those offenses and I don't get into a place to where we lose years of our lives again, because I don't ever want us to lose a minute, ever.
Oh, amen. Amen.
Sorry.
And I mean, I'm excited. Hang on a second. I'm going to turn this light on. It's getting pretty dark here. See if that's better. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm
Turn.
excited for where I'm at right now. And it's been a long time since I said to God, just, use me wherever you want to use me. But that's where I'm at. I don't know what his plans are for me. I certainly have hopes. We do, this living in the Eastern Tennessee was always on mine and your mom's bucket list, and somehow he got us here. I hope he keeps us here. That's up to him. But we'll see what happens. It's just exciting. And again, you're right though. It's when we got our eyes on him that all that went away. And we now have and here's the thing: once you get understanding, you keep understanding. You don't unlearn a lesson. You don't unlearn something.
No.
You don't. Somebody's battery's getting low.
Uh-oh.
If you learn to ride a bike, can you unlearn? No, you may not be good at it anymore. It's been too many years. But you know how to get on a bike and pedal and stay balanced. And that's the thing with spiritual truths. So as we have went through this road, I have a completely different understanding. So when I think about, and how did Paul put that? He said, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things that are before, I press towards the mark. Oh, there's my beautiful wife getting me fixed up with the charger. Thank you, honey. So, I mean, now that I have that understanding, I have a perspective. It's like, you know what? It's just flesh. It's just people. Wrong charger, honey. I need the Apple charger. Completely different. Completely different. But that's how we learn, you know. And Tammy, I know you've been on here. I've seen your name pop in and out. You know, I remember early on in my salvation, you know, Mark really just so mentored me and poured himself into me and just helped me and taught me. And I always think about line upon line, precept upon precept, here a little, there a little. It's how we learn. As we get understanding, as we grow in God, we draw nearer to God. We're more able to withstand the enemy. And you begin to see things for what they are. You know what? Whatever we're talking about is, it's never us versus people. It's always us versus the enemy. There's an enemy who is more than happy and willing to manipulate and use people to try and separate us from God. And it's just a totally different perspective now for me.
Let me read this question to you, Dad. This is from Kathy Lutz, and she said, my question is how to lead those you know in the church who are dealing with church hurt. Everyone wants to avoid this topic, or they really seem to want to stay where they're at. My heart breaks for those who are bound by church hurt. So I think, like, she's asking, how do you help others who are in that place? Because people don't seem to want to talk about it, or they just seem like they want to stay in that place.
Hang on, I'm trying to get charged back
Okay.
up.
Get your juice back on.
I'm trying. Hang on. This is going to get ugly for a second. All right. I think we're charging, and we're back on. So is how do you help people who don't want to be helped?
Yeah, I think she's saying, like, it seems like that the people want to stay where they're at.
Want to stay where they're at as far as in their hurt, or stay where they're
Probably.
at?
I think she means like they don't want to talk about it and they want to stay where they're at in their hurt.
Wow.
I'll answer that. You leave them alone and
take
sit back.
One. That one, I don't, nothing's popping out at me.
Well, it pops out at me all the time because I dealt with it with you for years.
What?
And we each had our own things we were dealing with.
Where do you come up with this?
That's where I think you really just have to get, okay, let me, I have so many thoughts coming. Knowing what I know about spiritual warfare now, I would do things very, very different. I would pray for Dad for the Lord to, you know, open his eyes or minister to his heart or heal his heart, whatever, those things. I would also now, instead of just praying for God to do those things, which is awesome, like, don't neglect that part, I would also be going into spiritual warfare. And I would have been speaking specifically to the walls around his heart to fall. I would have been saying things like, I command the walls around my dad's heart to fall in the name of Jesus. You may not stay. You may not be there. In the name of Jesus, I command you to break. I command you to fall. I command the lies to be silent. And I would have went into deep spiritual warfare. We didn't have those tools all the way along. So those things we didn't do, but that is for sure what I would be doing. And I would just try to talk to them as you can. As you know the things that they're dealing with, I would encourage them along the way and try to speak life into them as much as you can.
Yeah. Well, I think here's the other thing. And again, from what I learned praying for you that day, as Mom and I was praying for you and interceding, well, guess what? The Bible's true. And I say that very simplistic. But guess what nobody wants to talk about in the Bible? The demonic. I mean, doesn't the word talk about sickness and illness come being of demonic in nature? We saw that in you physically. How many of your physical illnesses were a manifestation of spirit? There's just things that we only, I don't want to say we, the church. And I think what's happened is, and this has always been the battle, the church has always had to try and keep the world at bay, the world at arm's length, the world out of the church so it doesn't influence its doctrine. But slowly, methodically, and surely, the world, Satan, has infiltrated the church, chipped away and chipped away and chipped away. You know, and now we want to be sophisticated, right? We want to kind of be modern. We want to be current. And we tend to then want to take out or skip over or not talk about those verses that people think, well, you're a loon, you're a nut. But what's the word say?
Yeah.
What does the word say? And not only does, and then here's where I'm at now, right? I'm always a huge Smith Wigglesworth fan. All of his stuff just leaps out at me now. It's like, man, I don't get it because I'm not Smith.
It gives it new
but
meaning,
I sure
though.
have a better understanding.
I'll be right back, Dad. Continue. I'll be right back.
So, and I think it's just vital for us as we learn. And like I said, I can't unlearn. And it's like all of a sudden, like I spoke earlier, I've been in the altars. I've been praying for people and delivered, cast demons out. Those things that happen, not a lot, but enough that I know what it is. I knew what it was with Nicole, and I saw that. But now I think, and Nicole, I'm just very, very proud of what she's doing in this ministry and what God's doing through her and with her when it comes to battling the demonic. But it's like a whole realization. It's like, those verses are there. It talks, we war against the principalities of darkness. But guess what? Honestly, I don't typically think about the principalities of darkness. At least I didn't used to. I pray, I do the whole church thing, did all that. But now I have a completely different perspective. A perspective I think is much more biblical, much more aligned with the Word of God. And it's like we are in a battle. We know that in the end times, there is going to be an increase in the Antichrist spirit. What's the Antichrist spirit? It's demonic. It's everywhere. Atheism is demonic. The belief there is no God. The whole progressive agenda is demonic. Everything about it is against God. So, you know what? Not only is it true, it's probably at its peak. Quite possibly, the activity and the attacks of the enemy right now in this very time are very possibly greater than they've ever been since Satan and his demons was thrown out of heaven upon their rebellion. And yet most of us are unaware it's even taking place. Most of us are unaware it's right there. And it's there. And I'll tell you, and let me share this real quick. How much time we got? Do I have a time limit?
Nope.
All right, well, that's not a good thing.
I don't do time limits. People can stay as long as they want.
That. You don't do time limits.
I don't do well with that.
No. Well, here's something I've noticed. I have prayers. I kind of used to have this mentality. When I pray, what's done is I prayed. And sometimes it is, and most often it isn't. I have prayers now that I have to pray daily for other people, just for help them, maybe, for physical things they're going through or whatever it might be. Because if I don't, they go through that again. And God's teaching me, and that's the demonic portion of this. There are demons, there's a demonic that attacks and attacks and attacks and attacks. There are some prayers you have to be very vigilant about. We have to guard against, whether it be with family or friends, loved ones, whoever it might be. Interceding, battling the demonic, that's totally different. It's changed me since that prayer with you that day. It's like, wait a minute, this thing's real. This thing's happening. There's stuff we got to be doing, and certainly getting tripped up by something as simple as church hurt is not one of the things we've got to be doing. We've got to be about our Father's business. We have got to be about battling, arming ourselves, preparing ourselves, being aware of what's going on around us in the spiritual realm. Because there's a spiritual realm. Churches don't talk about it. Churches don't teach on it. We want to talk about love, churches love. And it is, it should be. You shouldn't get hurt there either. However, the reality is we live in a fallen world with an enemy who is coming after the church like never before. Coming after our kids. Coming after believers. Coming after our nation. And it's never been greater than it is now. Yet we don't teach it at church. But that's where I'm at now. That's why I'm excited, whatever God has for me.
And I think too, that's part of that I was talking about. Whenever you're saying it exactly, when you shift your focus from the natural to the spiritual, a lot of the things just don't matter anymore. Like when you really talk about living in the spiritual realm with the Lord, and when you shift your focus from the natural to the spiritual, there are things that, in view of eternity, in view of the eternal, and in view of salvation and people getting to heaven and those things, some other stuff just doesn't matter anymore. And I'm not negating hurt. I'm not doing that at all, because I know things are painful. But whenever you view it through the lens of eternity and the lens of the spiritual, and know that the people who are attacking the most are probably ones who have been attacked really bad themselves spiritually.
Absolutely.
Why are they the way they are? Well, let's start looking, because nobody wakes up and just decides to be a mean, nasty person. That doesn't happen. Or they don't just wake up and decide to be a manipulated person or manipulative person, or whatever label you want to put on. They're that way for a reason. And if you really search the root cause, there's probably pain, there's probably rejection, there's probably abandonment, and then the enemy plays on that in them.
Mm-hmm.
So when the enemy plays on that in them, then they in turn hurt other people. So, you're dealing with a whole lot of people who have been really beat down, because the church in general is not equipped to fight against the enemy. It's just not. We get beat up. We have spent years getting beat up because we're not equipped the way that we need to be equipped. So you have groups of beat down, hurt people that don't know how to get free, trying to coexist with each other. And that's where a lot of the pain comes from. That's where a lot of the hurt comes from, a lot of the pointing fingers and all of this stuff, because hurt people really do hurt people. And
that's true.
yeah.
Hey, guess what? We're all on the same team.
Yep.
I'm always amazed how difficult it has been, not that I've done this recently, in the past, to get different denominations to come together and do things like, say, pray. Can we get all the churches together and pray for our town, or pray for our kids, or pray against this plague of drugs, whatever it might be? That can be very challenging. We're all on the same team. We are all the same team.
We only have one enemy.
Goal.
We have one enemy, and that's it.
That's it. I mean, that's it exactly. Yet Satan I don't think, and you correct me if I'm wrong, or let me know if you think of something else or have a different opinion. I don't think there's anything else that is more effective in his arsenal than this very thing.
Hurt in general, hurt and pain in general, yeah. Because what flows out of hurt, any type of hurt, any type of pain, rejection, abandonment. What flows out of rejection? Isolation. You start isolating yourself. You start pulling away. You start feeling less than. Well, what does all of that equate to? Then you don't know your identity in Jesus. If you don't know who you are in the Lord, are you walking in your authority? Absolutely not.
No.
So if you can trace all that back to the root cause of pain, look what all that can cause. I mean, that's a pretty big, hefty one for sure. Most of the people I work with and minister to, their main issues have come out of pain, because an early pain or any type of pain, and then that gets them off course. And I say them, I was the same way, but it's the same thing, because we could talk about pain in general. Church hurt is a pain. That's a hurt. That's a trauma. And so, yeah, I agree. Like, the enemy uses that to create all kinds of issues.
Well, that was loud. We can't forget this. It has a multiplication effect.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. If we keep the perspective, it's not just us. We're multiplying it into other people. Think about Jesus on the cross. What if Jesus had decided to respond differently rather than forgiving those who were persecuting? What if in his final moments he turned bitter? What if he let his flesh rule? I mean, What would John and the disciples and his mother, what would have happened? You know, Jesus left this whole thing in the hands of 11 people. They went and got another disciple. Pretty amazing. He left the fate of the world in the hands of 11 people, especially those 11, you know. Well, what would they have done? What would his effect have been on the church had he not responded, or had he responded in his flesh instead of responding in his spirit? If he had lost his perspective, if he had just dropped it for a moment, those followers of his that were at the foot of that cross, that were on Golgotha, what effect? How many of them would have had the boldness to do what they do? How many of them would have went and waited in the upper room? How many?
I think that right there is why it is so important that we remain, just lock ourselves in with the Lord when we are hurt, and don't start talking to a bunch of people, because people will pick up our offense. Our friends, they're going to want to take our side when there are no sides. Our family, they're going to want to take our sides, and they pick up our offense. And long after we've laid it down, they may still carry it. And that's a danger. That's a huge danger.
And, you know, and what did Jesus say? He who has not sinned, pick up the first stone.
Mm-hmm.
So how many of us are without sin other than me?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, none of us. And guess what?
Right.
We all mess up. We all hurt people. We hurt people intentionally. Man, let me rephrase it. I try to not hurt people intentionally. And I can stand here before God and say that. But I know I hurt people unintentionally, because every one of us do. The goal is not to hurt people, you know, but we've all sinned. We're all imperfect, every single one of us. So when it happens, yeah, I know, Judy, I think you said you got blindsided. That's really the worst kind. You know, sadly, I've always liked a good fight back in my younger days. I want to see it come, and we can do a fight. It's the blind side that really gets you, because you're off guard, right? I think it stings a little more, and it cuts a little deeper. But we have to keep in perspective, we're flesh, and we all mess up, and we absolutely, and I hate to say this, and I wish I didn't have to say this, we're all going to get hurt, and we're all probably going to get hurt more than once. It's going to be over and over and over, but hopefully we learn. Hopefully we start getting that kingdom perspective, that supernatural perspective, that spiritual perspective that lets us rise above it, to see it for what it is, to understand it for what it is, and let it just roll off our back and keep going. You know, because honestly, we're letting Satan dictate our lives at that point, right? Instead of living with peace, joy, in his presence, we're doing something completely different. And we're going to wallow in it. We're going to lay in it. We're going to stay in it. And hopefully we're going to find our way back before it's too late.
And it's a form of torment. I mean, it is torment.
And it's when you talk about hurting this flesh doesn't like to hurt.
No.
Your flesh has built-in defense mechanisms that automatically kick in. And it depends on who you are. We all have similar ones. Some have more of some, less of others. But overall, it's pretty stinking ugly. Our flesh is ugly when it gets hurt, but it's important to realize that. When I was young, this comes as a surprise. I know it comes surprises you. I had a bad temper. I've gotten really much. See, I knew you didn't know that.
Did you know I used to have a temper? Did you know that? Yeah, I know. I know.
You did not.
Anyway. Who knew?
Yeah, but I mean, and that's the thing where with time, with age, with maturity, I've gotten a handle on. But I think that's the whole process. I can use my temper as an example, but it's like that with our Christian walk. You can identify discipline after discipline after discipline a Christian should have in their life. Yeah. And I think that's the part of drawing closer to God. That's the part we have to learn. Because once we learn it, we can't unlearn it. I'm not going to start losing my temper again, no matter what my daughter tells me. I'm not going to do it because I've learned how to overcome that. Well, I have to learn, and I have. I think I'm pretty sure I've learned how to overcome this church hurt thing that's always going to be cropping. That's going to rise up occasionally. Um, I won't know for sure unless I'm tested to that level again, but I'm confident I have learned it. I'm confident that now I at least won't build the walls of Jericho around me again. I am absolutely positive that they had nothing on my walls as what I had constructed. So I think, it's the learning, it's the striving, it's keep doing what you know is right and run to God.
Do you guys have any questions that you guys would like to ask? If you,
She said,
I
do
did.
you think that sometimes as Christians, we need to set boundaries? Do you believe that this is helpful in dealing with church people? Although we are to forgive, doesn't mean we are to become punching bags for others.
No.
So you need to answer that.
Yeah, I think we never are to become punching bags.
I don't know your answer in Kathy Luke's question. Nobody heard me.
Oh, nobody heard you?
No.
Oh, you
I'll
can
read
loud and
it.
clear here.
Kathy said, do you think sometimes as Christians we need to set boundaries? Do you believe that this is hurtful when dealing with church people? Although we are to forgive doesn't mean we become a punching bag for others.
Yeah, and I apologize. Mom had just read that question to me, and it's coming in so loud upstairs, I thought everybody heard. And I think the answer to that question is, I don't think we're called to be punching bags at all. I don't think we stay in abuse. Let me put it that way. I don't think we stay in abuse. I think we help people. We do everything we can for people, but I don't think we ever subject ourselves to abuse long term. I may take some abuse to help somebody short term, but I won't stay in abuse long term. Does that make sense, Nicole?
And I mean, I feel like too, we always forgive no matter what anybody does to us. We're called to walk in forgiveness. So no matter how many times somebody hurts us, no matter what they say, what they do, how they act, we always have to walk in forgiveness. Now, does that mean we have to reconcile with them? Sometimes that can be two different things. You can walk in forgiveness but still not maintain a relationship with that person if they're very toxic, if they're abusive, if there's anything like that. What I would do is I would pray and say, Lord, you see the situation. What am I supposed to do here? Because his voice trumps everything. But I would say that there are definitely times that we can put boundaries up with toxic people or abusive people or people that you just can't trust. Now, if there's somebody in church or a friend or a coworker, and every time I give them personal information about myself, they're going and telling everybody, I don't even have to pray about this part. I'm immediately going to put a boundary in place where I tell them nothing else ever again that's personal. And it's not that I'm mad at them. It's not that I'm not walking in forgiveness. It's that logically, I'm not going to tell them information if I know they're telling everybody. So that's a boundary I wouldn't even pray about per se. I would just put it in place because I'm not exactly sure what boundaries you're referring to. But yeah, I mean, even in the church, if that same thing, or if there's people that just continually hurt you, you used to have a best friend in the church and she continually hurts you over and over and over. You absolutely need to walk in forgiveness, but I don't think you have to keep being around that. I think you can love her from afar, and I think that you continue to pray for her just like you did before, but you can love her from a distance, because in my opinion, we are never required to be a punching bag. Now, if that person needed something, I believe we are supposed to help them. If, whatever it is, we should help them. But I'm just talking about, like, you don't have to hang out and be best friends anymore, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think this is important, and I think we have, peace should be in our life.
Yeah.
And if we don't have peace, I think we have to find the source of that and kind of address it hopefully fix it or root it out, or in this case, put boundaries around it. Because I think the believer's life should be a life of peace.
Yeah.
The peace of God
Well,
should accompany us.
and I mean too, it's a thing of, you don't want to hear negativity all the time, and you don't want to fall into gossip, and you don't want to hear everything that is wrong in their life. So you can even put boundaries in place around that, as far as not joining into the conversations and not picking up that offense and not going over and over it with them. Like I would not partake in that type of conversations.
Yeah, and you bring up something very good, Nicole. We're not equipped to handle negativity.
Mm-mm.
When we hear negativity, we talk about how negativity is a very powerful influencer. And if we allow ourselves to be subjected to a barrage of negativity, it's going to affect us, and it won't affect us in a good way. So again, there are boundaries that we should have, And I'll give you this, Kathy. I think about, we use VidAngel so I can watch movies. With VidAngel, I can get rid of all the nudity and all the cussing. And so those are basically boundaries. So I said, I'm going to get rid of those two areas, then I can watch a movie rather than unfiltered. So I don't know if that's a very good example, but I'm thinking when it comes to boundaries, there are absolutely boundaries that we need to draw in our lives to protect ourselves, to protect our spirit person, um, because there's too many things that can influence us negatively, too many things that can take us away from God rather than towards God. Because really, we're called to make one another better. And if we're in negativity, if we're in chaos, if we're in all of that kind of a mess, we're not moving forward. We're not making one another better. We're actually hindering one another. So that's my thoughts.
I agree for sure. Do you guys have any other questions or thoughts? As we're waiting, because there's a little bit of a lag, do you want to announce when your next live will be, Dad? You can go ahead and use this platform to announce your next live. You can let me
Probably
know.
whenever you tell me.
Whenever
Just
I
let
tell
me
you.
know. Whenever you want it to be. So
Well,
I
I
don't know.
mean,
I had started that when I was in Arizona, started that Long Road Home series. I don't know when I'll get back to that. Probably not the best time being working supply chain with all of the current world economic conditions being what they are. Work's quite a challenge. So I don't
yeah,
see having the kind of time to kind of prepare as I would try and prepare for that series. Would love to do this though, and really have enjoyed this. I think you had stepped away maybe earlier. I was talking about just how much just proud of you for your obedience to God. I know He told you in that prayer session that you wouldn't recognize your life in a year, and guess what?
don't
Now, don't
recognize
think
it.
I cannot recognize you because you've changed so much. You can't recognize your life because it is absolutely, completely different from what it was a year ago when
Yeah,
God broke all that demonic off of you. And I just see what you're doing and you're helping and it's just an amazing scope because, and I think what I love for me is the purity of what you're doing. And I think that's one of the very challenges in ministry is to keep it pure.
yeah,
And that's not an easy thing to do
yeah.
because as a ministry is successful, people want to compliment. People want to, I guess I'll use maybe the word complimentary in a way that begins to feed your flesh. And if you're not careful, pretty soon you've lost the purity of what you're doing, and that
You
is
know why
such a
that's not
danger. Do what?
and it is because and I know exactly what you're talking about because the enemy comes in
He
and it's like,
does.
oh, that was good. But you know why that it doesn't work on me? I know who I was.
Amen.
I know me and myself, the mess I make.
Mhm.
I know me and myself. I don't come up with the things I talk about. I don't come up. And I think that we as Christians, we have to stay in that place of never thinking, oh, I did that. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. God did that through you. We didn't do anything. When we
Amen.
take over, we make a mess. That's what we do.
We just have to be a willing vessel for God to use. Because here's the thing, and I forget who said it. I think John Wesley said it. Pretty sure it's John Wesley said that nothing happens on earth short of prayer.
Oh, that's
And
good.
we go back to Genesis. Because when
Yeah.
God created man, when God created Adam and Eve, man and woman, we'll go that route, he gave us dominion over this earth.
Yep.
God took his hands off the earth at the moment he gave it to us. That's kind of makes you wonder why. We'll get to that later when we get to heaven. He gave it to us. Means he pulled his hands off of it, which means unless we ask in prayer, unless we intercede in prayer, unless we battle those things unseen, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
And I go back to, wow, we're close. We have to be close to the end times.
Yeah.
No one can convince me that Sodom and Gomorrah was any worse than America in 2021. If they were, it couldn't have been by
It
much.
couldn't have been by much.
I know we're in the last days. I know the demonic activity is more than it's ever been. And nothing happens without our prayers.
I think that we have another question. I'm going to read it to you in just a second. But I think what I would love to do is I've given my testimony several times, and I'm even actually going to give it again in a few weeks on my ministry page. I don't remember the date. But I've never, because I don't know your perspective. I don't have the perspective that you have because, to be honest, I was in and out of it a lot. So I don't even know. I know I got set free.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to do a live with you and talk about the deliverance session in detail, what it looked like from both my perspective and your perspective, because I think that would be really interesting.
Next time I'm going to wear full body armor and a helmet.
Just a spit guard. A spit guard will do. But I think let's get that planned. So
Let's do that.
let's answer this question. Gina said, what can you do other than praying, walking it out? What if your spouse is negative 24/7?
Wow, that's tough. I've been blessed with a spouse that hasn't been negative 24/7, even when I was.
Then maybe we should yell up and ask mom.
Hey,
I mean,
Mama,
A lot of prayer and interceding.
a lot of prayer and interceding. Well, you were the same way because you knew where I was. I mean,
well, and I
nobody
mean,
had anything on me for those, most of those 12 years, I wouldn't think.
yeah, and I mean, I was very negative myself.
Oh, and Mom said you just have to keep your mouth shut.
Because there were so many times, there's things I just wanted to lash out and say to you, and I didn't.
Didn't you hear her?
No,
She said
I
there's so
have
many
heard it,
times there's things she wanted to lash out and say to me.
but
Did I
she
make
didn't.
women have a gift for that?
But she did, and I
But
think
she
that right
did.
there is the hard part, not
Amen.
joining in with the negativity,
Yes.
because you can have a pity party together, you can have a negativity party together. It is so easy to join in on that because Ronnie and I both had a propensity to draw towards the negative and critical, and there were times we would feed on each other and make it worse. So you don't want to fall into that yourself. You want to make sure you guard against it major in your own life because it can be so easy. And not only can you get negative with them, you can get negative about them because they're negative. Why are they so negative all the time? Won't they stop being negative? And then before you know it, you fall into negativity about their negativity. And that's a really slippery slope, and you don't even recognize it because you can be so justified in it. Well, if they weren't negative all the time, our life wouldn't look like this. But in reality, you both are negative, but it's just about different things. So that's a
Well,
really big area to guard against.
and you earlier were accusing me of being somewhat rebellious, so maybe not. But here's the thing: if Mom had lashed out, I know me, I know my reaction, and if somebody tells me you need to get right with God,
You're going to
if
do the
somebody's
exact opposite.
beating me up, I know the direction I'm going, and it is not towards God. And I think, honey, that's a great point you make. As we pray and as we hope, um, and Mama has a trick she does. It's with oil. She anoints everything with oil around them, their pillows, the blankets, whatever, and she prays for them. She anoints them.
Mm-hmm.
She prays for them. And honey, I think you made an excellent point. Because I know with me, wow, the worst thing you can do is honestly probably tell me what I need to do. Even though I need to hear it, it's going to have the opposite effect. So I think that was excellent suggestion there. But
So
again,
I
it goes
think
back to all
for
we can
me,
do for people in the end is pray for them. We can pray for them, we can love them, and we can hope. And I do think, Patty, when it comes to oil, they don't have to know you're putting oil wherever.
She should just anoint
Just
everything his.
Mom said, anoint everything his. Put that on there and just pray and pray. And again, I'll bring this up because I think this is the answer to most things. It's fasting.
yeah.
When we truly fast, we tear down the demonic. We supercharge our spirit person. It is the most incredible, it's the most powerful thing we can do spiritually to put us in a position to be effective with our ministry, with our prayers. So I think even include fasting in that. And it's interesting because I think it was Matthew chapter 6. It's either 6 or 7. It's been a while, 12 years. Jesus said 3 things. He says, when you give to the poor, when you pray, when you give to the poor, and when you fast. 3 things. And he didn't, and the way he said them was that people just knew to do that.
Just knew you would.
Everybody knew. They knew you give to the poor. They knew you pray. They knew fasting was a part of their spiritual, religious discipline. Jesus didn't have to tell them to do it because they knew to do it. And I think that's something else as we talk about things a church has lost or isn't good at. Fasting is one of the most powerful tools we have as a believer. I think it breaks barriers, it breaks chains, it breaks bondage. And it may not be the first time or the second time, but I think if you can adopt the discipline of fasting on top of the prayer, on top of the oil, I think you'll see breakthrough. I believe that.
And spiritual warfare. Like you
Amen.
have to do spiritual warfare.
Amen.
Where you are binding the enemy and rebuking the enemy. I lost it. I don't even know what I was going to say. Guess it wasn't important.
Everything you say is important.
Oh, wait a minute. So, and I'm not asking you this, I'm not being silly or anything, like seriously, because I've heard other people say this. So, and I'm using you for an example because you've walked through this. You were called into ministry. Like there's no doubt God called you. You set aside that calling. Is that calling gone because you have walked away from it, or does that calling ever leave you, do you think?
Well, I think there's 2 ways to answer that. I think one way is God can call you for a season.
Yes, I believe that.
And I believe he does that with most people. I believe, and I think it can be not only for a season, there can be multiple times he calls you for a season. There's multiple times he has something he needs you to do. Because remember, he gave us dominion over the earth. He needs our hands. He needs our feet. He needs our help. He doesn't, although he could, he doesn't just make things happen. He works through
He works
his
through
church.
us usually.
So I think you can be called. You may even be called into ministry. You may go into full-time ministry, but it may only be for a season. It may be to fill in the gap until God gets the person there that he needs to be there long term. And I made that up. I'm just giving you an example of what it could be.
Yeah.
There's a lot it could be. So I think that is one group. I'm not in that group. This
Say
is
it
interesting.
louder.
Do I?
I said,
What?
say it louder.
No. And but this is interesting. I don't even know if I ever told you this. I knew as a kid I had a call of God on my life.
Mm.
And then the whole first love thing happened.
Yeah.
And then I got hurt. And then I ran as far away as I could. Well, same thing. You like I said, when I use that first love as an analogy or a comparison, I truly believe it is the other side of the same coin, because it has the exact same effect. It did on me. I ran as far away as I could from serving God. Still believed in God. I'd still pray. There's times I'd intercede. There's times I'd fast, but trust me, the whole oomph, and you saw it, the oomph wasn't there. For me, I just have to get back. I've lost years, I don't know what the eternal ramifications of my failures to keep things in perspective are. There has to be something, right? There's a 12-year void for me in the things I should have been doing for the Lord that I wasn't. There's some kind of eternal consequences to that for people, and that's on me, and I will have to give an account for that.
I think that, too, where I was going is that people will say, well, I've went too far. I've done too much. God can't use me now.
Yeah. Well, see, that's where we go back to, you know what? In that whole time in my 12 years, I wasn't like a hellion. I wasn't.
No, but there are some people that are. But there are some people that are, because they get hurt in the church, so they go the exact opposite
But
direction.
guess what? It's, I don't want, ow, that was a window. I don't want to say this to minimize it in any way, but I'm going to say it's just sin.
Yeah.
Not only is it forgiven in a moment, it's forgotten in a moment by our Father in heaven.
Yeah.
You cannot possibly go so far away from God that ever get out of his grasp.
Yep.
And I forget, there was a t-shirt years ago, I forget how it exactly goes, but if you're 10,000 miles from God, you only have to take one step towards him.
Yep.
He's going to do the others, or something like that. And that's true. God doesn't call those who are equipped. He equips those he calls.
Yeah.
And that's important to remember, because you're never so far removed that God can't use you. You're never so far removed that God doesn't want to use you. You're never so far removed that he removes the plans he has for you, because the plans he has for you were formed in the Ancient of Days. God's plan for your life, God wrote before the creation of this world. It's in the Ancient of Days. He has a plan for you. That plan will never change.
Yep.
God's not wrong. God got it right when he wrote it, before you were ever conceived, before you were ever born, before you ever took your first breath. God had a plan for you.
Amen.
And you can't run from it. Moses tried to run from it. How'd he do?
Didn't work.
Didn't work. How many years did Moses lose? He lost quite a few years, but didn't God redeem those years? And I'm hoping God redeems my years. I hope he redeems my years of lost ministry. And I don't want to say a lot about where we're at church, but the first Sunday when we finally got to go, we watched several online live services streaming, and then we were going to go, and then we had a rare snowstorm here in Eastern Tennessee, and I can hardly get up my driveway when it's dry, much less when it's covered in snow. So we didn't get to go. And then another week there was power outage from a different storm. But we finally got there. But I mean, God gave me, I saw some things in the spirit, and I say that guardedly because I'm not one that says I see things in the spiritual realm, but I saw things in the spiritual realm for that church. So we'll see what happens. I certainly hope he redeems my lost time. We'll see where it goes. It'll be interesting if it ever gets to the point you need to go back to full-time ministry, because that would be an interesting conversation to have with God. Quit looking at me that way.
I will
We'll
definitely, I don't think I've
see.
ever said this to you. I don't think. But that will be a day that I will look you square in the eye and say, neener, neener, neener. And that's all I'm going to say.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
You know. You know.
So,
Okay, I do want to ask one. I want to hit one more area, and then if nobody else has anything, we'll let everybody go. We've kept everybody really long, but this has been so good.
what time is it?
It's 8 o'clock my time.
Oh, my Lanta, that's 9 o'clock my time.
Yeah, yeah. So the one area you kind of hit on this, but I want you to kind of talk a little bit further, because and I can't remember exactly how you said it, but you did use the word lukewarm. You said after you went through the hurt, you got to a place where you was lukewarm. You kind of started allowing things in that you would have never allowed in before. I can't remember exactly what all you said, but can you talk about that just for a minute? Because here's what happens, or what I see happen, and it happened with all of us. You get hurt, and there's not sin in that. Like your life isn't full of sin in that. You're just in a place of hurt.
Mm-hmm.
But then if you don't deal with it, it can go to a place of where you start letting stuff come in that you shouldn't let come in. You start maybe, I don't know, lowering your threshold of the things that you allow around you. And you don't live, and I'm not saying you're not, like you said, well, I didn't become a wild man. I wasn't out living it up. And I'm not even talking about that. But, you may not live to the same standards you lived as before because you're just in a different place. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, and probably, something I can think of prior to that, we didn't have many TV shows on the house that had swearing in them at all.
Yeah.
And I can tell you during that time, it didn't even faze me anymore.
Yeah. That was, yeah. And it's like
remember,
you just get to the point where it's like, not that big a deal.
Right, exactly.
And what
we
is
remember
that?
this, from when we were in Indiana, it's like I had zero tolerance for swearing. I don't swear, but I mean in the home, right? If I'm at work, I can't stop people from swearing.
Right.
I'm going to hear it when I'm out in the world, but I never wanted to hear it in my home. Why? I don't. I still don't. But I got to where I just didn't notice it anymore. That became.
We get dull. It's almost like you get
and that's
dull.
part of the danger of becoming.
You're not sharp anymore. Yeah.
And I can't help but think of Revelations when it says God would rather you be hot or cold than lukewarm. Because if you're cold, you're going to realize it and God can get your attention. If you're hot, that's where God wants you.
Yeah.
Lukewarm is such a dangerous place. Like I said, my time, it was kind of weird. And I guess lukewarm is the absolutely best way to sum it up. It's not like I did anything stupid.
Right.
I didn't do anything awful.
But you weren't living on fire for God. Like that's
exactly.
kind of, it's like that's what happened.
You do let things in, like, and that's minor. Like now, we got the VidAngel. So at least I still didn't watch movies that had garbage in them.
No,
I didn't do that. But
no.
I would still use even VidAngel for that. But I'm thinking more, there was TV shows I would watch that I would never, that on regular television, that I never would have watched when I was on fire for God.
Yeah. And I think like my whole point was, and I'm not like putting you on blast or anything like that.
No,
we all did. We all did the same thing. But I see that happen so many times. It's like, well, I just don't go to church because I got hurt. Okay, I get that. I understand that. But examine your life. If you can tell me that you're just not in church because you got hurt, but you are on fire for God and you're as close to him as you've ever been, great. Okay, I get that. But are you out of church with church hurt and you're allowing compromise in your life? Because that's two very different things.
Mm-hmm. It is.
Very different. And you are in two very different places in your life. If you are out of church because you've been hurt or for whatever reason and you're allowing compromise in, that's where there has to come a shaking. That's where it's time to, like, let's take a real inventory of our lives. And we had to do it. And I'm not pointing my finger at anybody. I'm not saying that we all, I mean, you and I know each other's lives. We did it. We had to do this because it can only so long keep you away from God before you start slipping down that slippery slope,
Exactly.
in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And I think that's where that goes back to, don't forsake assembling yourselves one with another.
Yeah.
There's a reason God said we have to go to church. Without that, I think you're right. I think I think the best way to describe it, it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
The longer you stay out of church, the more you slide down that slope. The further
And the
you
further
slide
away
down
you
that
get
slope,
away.
the more you're gonna, if you would examine it, you'll find compromise. A little here,
Yeah.
a little there. You know, I'm not talking big stuff. It may even
No.
be big stuff. But I mean, to stay out of church, it is and I used to not think this way until I went through it. You know, you think, well, you could probably stay home and be a good Christian and make it. And I don't think so. You know, I'm not saying you can't, but I'm almost saying with the level of activity of the enemy, at how we are just barraged with atheism, how we're barraged with the progressive agenda, how you can't do anything in this country and you're not getting blasted that everything that's against God, against his very principles. I don't think you can stand alone. I think that's the whole point of assembling ourselves, to get with other believers, to strengthen one another. When one's down, to lift them up in prayer. When one's sick, lay hands on them and heal them. I think, and it's only going to grow more so as these days darken, right? We certainly live in an era and a time of ever increasing darkness. I think it's paramount that the church become or get back to the first century church model that Jesus gave us. I am a big believer in the first century church model.
Yep.
I'm a big believer that after you preach the word, what follows? What
Signs
follows in
and
the first century
miracles.
church? Signs and wonders and miracles. You know,
And
I really
deliverance.
changed my whole opinion on the ability to not go to a local church and to be able to maintain your salvation.
It's
I'm not
it's
saying
very,
it's
very difficult.
impossible. I'm saying it's incredibly difficult.
Difficult, yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanted to hit on, or do you think we hit everything?
I don't know. I feel like we beat this thing to death.
But it's
I think
such,
it's a
it's
big
so
topic.
important. It's
It's a
very,
big
very
topic.
important.
So honestly, we could probably do more on these, because if you really take the experiences people have and what they went through, and you really start really analyzing and more like, say, from a counseling therapy standpoint, getting people through this, it's big. I mean, and again, I go back to there's probably not a bigger issue that Christians deal with. And we have to be able to help one another and equip one another to get through this. Because here's the thing, it's temporary.
Yep.
We determine the length of it. We determine how long it's going to impact us. Not intentionally, but I certainly, in the end, I determined it's going to take me 12 years. That was up to me. I could have broke that after a week. I could have broke it after 2 weeks. I could have broke it, whenever. But I failed to understand it. I failed to have the proper perspective, and I think this is a huge topic. I hope it's helped. I hope, the things we've said and the things I've shared are, help people to get through theirs, or help them to share with others to get through it.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's sad. I mean, to me, it's grievous. It isn't what the church should be. And honestly, it shouldn't. The church should reflect Christ, but we know it's not going to, sadly, because it's a bunch of believers, I think about people believe in world peace. John Lennon wrote a song about world peace. It's not going to happen. World peace is not going to happen until Christ returns. You know, a church without hurt is not going to happen until Christ returns, until perfection comes. So knowing that, we have to be aware of so we don't get tripped up. And then, like Kathy Luce, we got to figure out how to help those who have been tripped
Help
up.
others. That's right.
You know, and that's the key to this thing. And because then we begin to mobilize the church. We begin to equip the church for battle. And we start turning the tide on this thing. Because here's the great thing about God, it's never too late. It's never too late with God. It's never too late for you. It's never too late for your calling. It's never too late for your salvation. It's never too late if you're still breathing. It's never too late.
Now that sounds like something I've heard before. I wonder where I heard that.
Probably some of my awesome ministry teaching. Maybe
This
not.
has been fun. We definitely are going to schedule something soon, I think, if you have the time. In closing, what right now would be your catch-all final thought on if anybody is in a place of church hurt, what would be your number one piece of advice? If you could have them remember anything, what would the number one advice be?
Run to God
Yeah.
as fast as you can. You may not want to. You may not feel like it. Oh, which brings me a story. Let me share this.
Okay.
All right. So Caitlin was little. He was about this tall. I don't know what age that was. He was about that tall. And I was home. I was on the couch and I had a migraine. And he had all his wrestlers out because we'd get them all out and we'd play wrestling. And he wanted me to play with him one night, play wrestlers. And it's like, Caitlin, I have a migraine. I said, as soon as it goes away, I'll play. I think you had a similar story that you can share. But he comes over and he's a little guy. And he lays hands on me and he prays for me, for my headache to go away. And well, then he expected me to get up and play. You know, so I'm laying there, my head is exploding. And I hear God say, and what I said was, you know, I'll get up when my head stops hurting. And I heard God tell me if I would get up, my head would stop hurting. God's way required faith. God required me to do something I didn't want to do, to step out in faith that if I got up, if I sat up on that couch from that migraine, that I could get down on that floor and play with Kayla and his prayer would be answered. And I stepped out in faith, and boy, I didn't mind me because my head was bad. But when I sat up and I got down on the floor, didn't want to at all. I didn't want to move. But when I did, it was gone. And that's the exact same thing. You may not feel like it. You may not want to. But your breakthrough, your restoration is that close.
Yep. One step away.
One step.
And I think sometimes we don't even have to make the full step.
We don't.
He
Absolutely.
just wants us to pick our foot up off the ground.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, all we have to do is make a motion towards him. He's going to come he's going to close that distance. He's going to close that gap and be right there with us.
Yep.
All right.
All right. Well, you
I'm
guys.
signing off from the great state of Tennessee.
Well, and thank you. I appreciate it. You, I think we got another invite in the comments. You may want to go back and look. Somebody wants you to share in their group.
What?
So, yeah.
Well, you told me this wouldn't spread. That was the deal.
No, I think I said the exact opposite. I definitely want to get some stuff in the works for us to share together again, and soon, if we can. That would be fun.
You schedule it. I'll show up.
Amy said thank you. Aunt Carolyn said this has helped me so much.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Karen said it's been a great teaching. There's a ton of comments.
Awesome.
So there's a lot. So after it's over, go back and read the comments. You can reply to people through that way also.
Okay. Well, I know
If anybody wants to reach out to you, I'm putting you on the spot right now.
Okay.
But if anybody wants to reach out to you for prayer, is that okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And I'm the same way. If anybody wants to reach out to me, you can reach out to me anytime.
Anytime.
If you are curious as to, okay, what are you guys talking about when you talk about me going through deliverance? Because I talk about that a lot. If you've not heard my full testimony, you can find it on Facebook. It's all over the place, or on YouTube. If you go on my page at all, you'll find it. Deliverance has been instrumental in my life. I have been set free 100% from mental torment. If you are being tormented mentally, please reach out. Don't wait another second. Reach out. Let me get you some information. I would really love for Dad and I to do another time together where we actually go into a lot of details about what that looked like and what he was experiencing on his side as far as the prayer and things like that. I have some other things that I would like for us to go into. Dad, I would think about this. You have a very long history of fasting. I know you've done research on it. I know you've operated it. You've done it. So I would love for you to share on fasting at some point, not putting you on the spot, but just think about it, get back to me.
No,
I would
whatever
love
you need to do,
to
I
do
will
that.
do it. So you
Um,
schedule it and I'll do it.
oh, well.
As long as I get a week in between.
Okay,
As
God.
long as I get a weekend in between.
Okay.
Doesn't necessarily have to be a week, but I need the weekend.
I get that. Coming up later this week on Thursday, I'm going to be teaching on submission. Starting the first week of May, I'm actually doing a course on deliverance and spiritual warfare training. If you want to get in this battle and you're like, I don't even know what you guys are talking about. What do you even mean spiritual warfare? What does this even look like? I am doing a course in a different group, and we're going into full details. I have like 120-page teaching that I do. This will be the second time I've done it. And it will be very detailed about how to get into spiritual warfare, how to do deliverance, how to get people free from the bondage of the enemy. If you're interested in that, reach out. And I think that's all I have. And Dad, I appreciate you. I love you.
Love you too.
Good to see you digging some graves up and putting some calling back on. Love it.
Whatever.
So I will let everybody go, and I will talk to you all later. Love you all.
Thank you so much. Had a great time.
Me too. We'll do it again soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.